We talk about emotions on this show, relationships, spirituality, physical fitness, a lot of fitness lately. And one area that we haven't talked about a lot lately, which is super important because it kind of fuels all of the other areas in a way, is money, right? Talking about finances, talking about how to earn money, what to do with that money, how to grow a business. And obviously, sales is a big part of any business. If sales doesn't exist in a business, then that business doesn't exist, at least long term. And we have a very special guest with us for you today. His name is Drasko Rajcevic. And we're going to be talking about money. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. We're going to be talking about how to consistently earn $10,000 each month in your business. If you're currently working a job and you want to start your own business, or maybe you're working a job and you're operating your business at the same time after your normal job is over, then this episode's going to be for you, because imagine this. Imagine you are earning $10,000 a month every single month from your business, or what some people might call, which I don't necessarily like this term, but your side hustle. Imagine if you were earning $10,000 each month from what you were doing to serve a greater good. Imagine having the lifestyle of being able to do whatever you want, wherever you want, with the people you want. Imagine having total financial freedom by earning $10,000 a month. Because, I mean, I'm pretty sure you've heard the stat of, when you're earning over $100,000 a year, there's only so much more that you can do with your lifestyle. After that point, it becomes, well, how can I give more? How can I impact more? So our guest, Drasko, today is going to talk to us about how we can consistently earn $10,000 a month, as well as what is holding us back from making that a reality. So without further ado, let me give you a little bit of an introduction here to Drasko. For those who don't know Drasko, he's been a coach since the age of 16 when he started coaching martial arts. Despite graduating for business school, he quickly realized that the 9-to-5 life wasn't for him. I hear you, brother. That led him down a path of establishing and growing what quickly became Quick Body Weight Loss, which was a brick and mortar studio dedicated to helping women with a lifelong struggle with fat loss. After 10 years in that space, his coaching evolved towards teaching heart-based marketing to other coaches, and now to his current passion of helping evolve the human behind the entrepreneur through his business and movement, 10K Norm. Drasko, it is a pleasure to have you here, my friend.
It is a pleasure to be here. And you know what? I knew this was going to be a good podcast when I was like, hey, look, like we both have this, are rocking like the same hairstyle, you know, like not a lot of hair at the top.
So I think you've got me beat though, man.
A little.
Mine's migrated a bit
because the
here.
Camera can't see right at the top of my head. So that's the only reason why I was like, I knew this was going to be good for that reason.
No, it's definitely going to be good, man. I mean, for appearance sake, but also for the sake of, I've been in sales my whole life. I've always been obsessed with, I don't want to say this in a weird way, but obsessed with earning money, right? Money is a great, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a great keystone of how you're doing in terms of what a lot of people define as success, right? It's not everything when it comes to success, but if you're not earning money, then it's very difficult to focus on other things, because when you're broke, you're thinking about money, right? And you're not thinking about money in a good way. You're thinking, well, where am I going to get it? How am I going to pay the bills? So I love talking about money and finances, and I'm happy you're here to do that. And I'm curious, exactly who do you help with your business, 10K Norm, and how do you help those individuals?
Yeah, so say the best way to describe the business and who I help is fundamentally what I do is I help heart-centered entrepreneurs. So I work with a lot of like coaches, wellness professionals, intuitives, people in that space. And what I specialize in helping is heart-centered entrepreneurs that are under 10K months, basically transcend all of the blind spots that keep them from thinking, feeling, acting. So kind of the inner game of it. And authentically marketing so they can normalize 10K months in their business. And the reason I chose 10K months is very much in tune with your intro. I think it is kind of the first milestone that not just heart-centered entrepreneurs or like coaches, but like in general entrepreneurs hit as this like, okay, this is the milestone that means I have something that has legs. Right. And I always emphasize it's your version of 10K months. That may or may not be like the figure amount, but I think it's like that first milestone that people can hit as solopreneurs. And then they can decide, like, do I like my life this way, or do I want to go further, which is going to require building out teams and having systems and, starting to outsource, which is like a whole different animal. And I was like, what I'm interested in is, why do people get in their own way to not be able to hit that first milestone? Which is similarly to what I did in my previous business, which was like, many people know this is what I need to eat. This is where I am. And there's this gap. And I was always fundamentally interested in, what is it that keeps people from crossing that gap in my own life, in my clients' life. Initially it was weight loss. Now it is, okay, I know what I can be doing to hit this milestone. Why am I not doing it? So in summation, that is like the core problem that I solve. Like, one of the best ways that I kind of heard this be described is like fundamentally, I think I'm a thought surgeon, right? Like, I go in and I operate on the thoughts, feelings, and actions that stop people from getting the results that they actually want. And in 10K Norm, we also combine that with marketing fundamentals that, just like a diet, like at the end of the day, you need some skills like outside of just the inner work to be able to execute on the thing. I do the same thing with 10K Norm. So that's kind of a summation of the overall business that I'm in now.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, no, there's a lot that goes into what you just said, especially that fascinating gap in between where someone is and where they want to be. And I like how you said that there's skills that people need, but I also love in your framework, which I definitely want to touch on with you here, how there's that inner work involved. It's the thoughts behind it, whether it's the fear of success, the fear of failure, the fear of taking any kind of risk whatsoever. Some people, in my opinion, I'll ask you this later, but I don't believe everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur. I really don't. I think some people are meant to work for a company and rise up in that company and somehow live their purpose in that company. So when it comes to you and coaching since you were 16 years old, I mean, so it's been in your blood for the longest time here. What got you started in this industry? How did you find yourself doing what you're doing? What's been the, I know we talked about it for a few before the show, but how did 10K Norm come to be?
Yeah, so the deeper story of that is, so I started doing martial arts when I was 11, fell in love with it right off the bat. And it was just something I gravitated to quite a bit. Like, I always showed up. I always like worked hard. It wasn't anything somebody ever had to like motivate me to do. And I guess 5 years into it, around the time that I was 16, my coach, he's like, hey, just like lead like the class with like the low belts. I was like, okay, so I just kind of started doing what he did, and I started being really good at it. And like, now that got me into, I was leading a lot of the kids classes, that I was leading a lot of the beginners classes, that I was leading some of the adult like cardio kickboxing classes. And it was just naturally, I would be good at it. People would enjoy it. People would comment on it, but it was never something that I like thought about doing, right? From being from like immigrant parents, like it was always, you go to school, you get good marks, like that was always the thing. And, fortunately I like learning as well. So I just naturally gravitated to that. Went to business school and, got into a co-op program. I was working while I was in like business school, and quickly realized like, okay, I do my job well, but like, I hate my life here, like it was just like, I hate this. And I started thinking, okay, well, what can I do that I like doing regardless? Because this whole time I was training. And I'm like, okay, well, that I do regardless. Like, doesn't matter what's going on in my life. I'm doing it. I'm already teaching. Like, maybe I can make money doing that. So I started basically doing that part-time. So like, I had a side hustle before a side hustle was a thing, which is I went after work and I taught like cardio kickboxing classes. And as I started doing more of that, like after work, people started coming to me for weight loss. And like, I was a chubby kid growing up, so that was always something like near and dear to my heart. So I was like, I related to these people. Sure, like I'll help you, no problem. So I wasn't even thinking about coaching. Like I realized like later on that like everything that I was doing was coaching, but I just started following the breadcrumbs, right? I was like, okay, people are coming to me for weight loss. The stuff that I'm teaching them isn't exactly the most appropriate thing for them to do to get their goal. So, okay, let me start learning how do I actually do exercise? How do I coach exercise, right? Strength training and things like that. Then it's like, okay, well, now we're getting better at this. But I'm like, I get them a good workout, then they go home eat a whole bunch of donuts. Now it's like, well, okay, this is not really working out again. Then I started learning nutrition, right? And I got really good at that and I started implementing that into my programs. And then it's really where I think my zone of genius kind of revealed itself, which was, okay, so I know the exercise part. And at this point, I had like quit my job and like I was doing this full time, right? So I know the exercise piece, I know the nutrition piece, but the problem is the behavior piece. Like people still aren't doing the things that they know they should, or they're my recommendations. So I started going heavily into, okay, well, how do I close the gap between what my recommendation is and what they actually go home and what they actually do? So I actually started getting coached into how do you become a good coach? And, you know, I got a lot of education into like counseling modalities and like, you know, things like motivational interviewing. If you have any coaches here, it's like, how do you actually talk to people in a way that anchors them to move towards the things that they say that they want to do, how do you overcome ambivalence? So I really got like deep and good into the behavior side of things. And that's when Quick Body Weight Loss, as it was finally formed, was kind of born. And then that grew into having our own like nutrition programs in-house that combined the lifestyle piece. I had, you know, a staff of 4. And the funny thing around that time is all of this stuff was going good, but then that business imploded. And it imploded because of my own emotional constipation and my own emotional blind spots.
And so, at what point in the business did it start to implode? How long were you in business before that happened?
So year 10 is when I closed it.
Wow, you had that business for 10 years, brick and mortar.
So yeah, brick and mortar. Like it wasn't always like my own building. I had used the space for the martial arts, like my coach for a long time. But yeah, in its various iterations, it was 10 years. So literally January 2010 is when I registered the business. January 2020 is when I closed it. So yeah, it's 10 years.
And what was this emotional constipation that you mentioned? Like what 10 years later, what happened at that mark and why did it happen that caused your business at the time to take a turn?
Yeah, so it was inevitable. It was inevitable because, so I am like very like head oriented. And what I mean by that is like I'm very intellectually leaning. I like to solve things by thinking about them and, you know, think through problems. The problem with that is any of your strengths always become your first distortions. And what I mean by that is whatever we are good at is the first thing we lean to solve all of our problems. So let's just say if I take the opposite, and like this thing comes up often in the people that I work with now, they're very empathetic. So if my core strength is like empathy and feeling and understanding people and like sensing where they're in pain, that makes for a great, you know, coach or counselor. However, if that becomes my first distortion, what that means is now I use that to solve all problems. So I put everybody in front of myself. I don't have any boundaries, right? I'm always like walking on eggshells to make sure that everybody's okay, because that's the only way that I can feel okay. So our primary strength becomes our first distortion. Yeah. For me, it wasn't about leading with my emotions and my heart. It was about leading with my head. So I was trying to outthink all of my emotions, which, you know, spoiler alert, doesn't actually work. So what ended up happening is I was looking at all of my emotions like somebody would look at animals at a zoo, right? I would be totally disconnected from my body and totally disconnected from like what my inner truth was, because I was like looking at it through glass. I'd be like, oh wait, like there's anger, there's frustration, there's annoyance, there's depression. And I was trying to outthink those pieces without actually feeling. So even while the business was active, I went through a big breakup, and that was the first part that really opened up this capacity to feel, right? Like I always said it, like for that time is I was always involved in personal development. I didn't start it until that period where I actually realized like I need to feel things in order to move forward. Wow. The funny thing about feeling things is when you've suppressed it for like, you know, decades, a lot of things start to suck, right? Because now it's like the full wave of everything coming through. And how that relates back to the business is, I didn't realize that that business existed so I could fill the hole in my soul. And what that means is like, I had pretty much a belief that like, okay, if I could just help enough people, then I could help myself, right? Like if I could solve enough people's emotional eating issues, then I could solve my own. If I could fix enough people in the world, then I would be fixed. So that was like one thing. And what that led to is like a fundamental, like really tuned in understanding of people's pain. And I got so good at marketing to that pain that people were coming in droves, but they were leaving equally quickly. Why?
Wow.
All of my internal systems were structured around change. Like I wanted to fundamentally change people. So I was basically doing life coaching through the guise of nutrition, but I was marketing it in a way that was like, this hurts so much. Come here, we're going to give you relief. And that is a big, big disconnect that I think anybody who's in that kind of space needs to be aware of. So that was part of the reason that it imploded. But then there was also like the other.
Let me stop you there real quick because I want to touch on what you just said there because you're saying a lot of really good things. So that disconnect of you marketing with the guise of, hey, come in here. I understand your pain. I want to help you change that. What was the problem there? What was the disconnect there?
So the disconnect was because I understood it so well and I could articulate it so well. Like I knew how the whole sales conversation was going to go before it happened. Like I could predict what they were going to say based off of their answers. The marketing had the same thing. All of my front end, like funnel numbers were all good. I even got other people to look at them when, the business was kind of starting to go bad. Everything was great. The problem was by attracting somebody and then, ownership on my end, I wasn't setting the right expectations on what's going to be happening on the fulfillment end. So it's kind of like the classic, your salespeople are really good and they, bring the people in, but then that's actually different than what the delivery and the fulfillment is. That's where the disconnect started to happen. So that fundamentally is what was happening, but I never looked at the fulfillment side. Why? Because fundamentally I was like, no, people need to change because if they can change and I can change and I know I'm worthy. So like that was a blind spot that I never wanted to look there. I always focused on the front end, and I kind of did the caveman thing where I was like, I bought into the whole, like, you're one funnel away from success. And I was like, no, we just need to go more. And that just drove my costs up so high that I ended up like, imploding because like financially it was unsustainable. But it was because I didn't want to look on the flip side. So that
because you were so good at marketing and actually selling and getting them there. And when it came to the fulfillment, that's where you're saying you took extreme ownership in saying, I wasn't as great at the delivery as I was at the marketing and the sales portion of things.
I was great at the delivery for the few people that were willing to go through the real change work. Because when somebody's coming at, like, think of the consciousness of the person coming in, right? If I'm selling to you to relieve your pain and you're buying into it, then fundamentally what you're expecting is on the other side, I relieve your pain. Real change requires that you work through that discomfort so that you get to the other side and you can transcend it. It is a completely different consciousness of the person coming in. So it's not that our fulfillment systems weren't good. They were. We have like a lot of success stories through them, but like they required a significant amount of work, right? And my front end marketing didn't actually reflect that. So it got the wrong people in the door. And I was distracted with the fact that we were getting people in the door, but I wasn't looking at the disconnect between those two numbers. And that was all on me as the owner, as the guy who was trying to fill the hole in my soul, as the one who just wasn't in a space to look there. And I only looked at that after the business imploded.
I relate to what you're saying in a kind of a similar way. I just ran a program called the Be Better Bootcamp, and it's a 6-week program. And we had a lot of people sign up and a lot of people got amazing results. Everyone got great results. But when I was doing the after call to ask for feedback, how their experience was, several people said to me, Brandon, like, it was a great program. It was different than what I expected it to be, though. And I was like, well, what do you mean? How is it different? And they're like, well, when you say Be Better Boot Camp, like I expected it to be very different than what it actually was. And I was like, well, how so? And they said, well, boot camp means long hours, up late nights, always doing things. Beforehand, I was stressed. I was anxious. I was wondering, did I get over my head with this thing? But then we went through it, and it was a lot more tame than I thought it would be, right? We spent 2 hours a week versus the 12 hours a week I thought we were going to spend. And I said, well, what would you recommend? Should I change the name? And they said, well, maybe just be more upfront with what the expectations are for the program. So something I'm going to be doing next time is being very transparent about, hey, this is going to require this many hours of your time each week for the actionable things with the program. Would you say that that was the main change that you made at that point, was being more upfront with what the expectations looked like, or how did you overcome that hurdle there?
Well, in full transparency, I actually didn't overcome it. It took
in that business.
Yeah, in that business. And in the new one, yeah, 100%. But in that business, it had to implode for me to start to realize these things. And I agree with you. And for anybody listening, like, this is an extremely fine-tuned kind of game, right? Because you're not only looking at like the copy issues, you're not only looking at, okay, who is my audience? What is the fulfillment? What do I provide? You're also looking at how does all of this be, like, how is all of this structured in the consciousness and energetics of the people that it's actually attracting, right? Like, if the copy is designed in such a way that like it's getting reactive people, then they're going to expect reactive things on the fulfillment side. If it's more about, okay, like this is, about doing less work for more results, it's about stepping back, tuning in, figuring out what's wrong, like then you're getting more of a like willful, intellectual, intuitive type of like reaction to people, right? So it's, even if you're looking at it from a sales perspective, like you got to know who on the other side, like what are they going to resonate with, what state are they in. And then even as a salesperson, this is where I failed because I wasn't looking at myself. Like, it's a self-awareness of, do I want to work with somebody who is in that reactive state, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, I don't. I'm not looking to work with people that want relief. I'm looking to work with people that want change, right? But I have to show up in accordance and in alignment with, like, I'm here to serve people that want change. They want to change in this way, and they're willing to do this type of work, right? So I see it now because, I had to go through a lot. So yeah, if I could give one piece of advice to people, it's like, take a step back. It's like, and we talk about this, like, I'm working with the wrong people and working with the wrong audience. Okay, great. But how am I showing up to attract that? Because the common denominator between every person you say yes to is you saying yes to them, right? So I think that's a part that we always skip over because it requires us to look at ourselves.
Yeah, that's powerful. When it comes to working with those who are reactive, when it comes to working with those who are, more intellectual, and how you attract them based on the copy, like what's an example of how you might, and I know we're kind of going off in different directions here, but I like where we're going. What is a way that you would alter the copy to grab someone who is reactive versus grab someone who is intellectual? And do you think some people, based on your experience, enjoy working with the reactive people? Some work where I don't like working with the reactive people, right? I don't necessarily want to work with the people who are not so far gone, but I like working with the people who are already doing well and they want to do better and be better, hence the name of the business, right? So how have you structured your copy in a way to attract the people that you want to bring into your practice?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I would say, first and foremost, for the people that want to do a deeper dive into this, check out Scott Alford, because this is kind of where I learned and put the wording to this to like what I was kind of intuitively feeling. So these like states of consciousness is something that he covers. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. But as far as like answering your question, so, you said, okay, I don't want to work with reactive people. Well, then what am I putting in my copy and in my funnels and in my front end offers that is reactive? Okay, so, we only have 2 spots left register for the next 24 hours. If you're on a live sales call, it's, is it pressured in the sense of like, listen, if you don't do this right now, your family's going to hate you and like you're going to be a failure in life, right? Like that high pressure sales, I'm making somebody react or feel guilty for reacting. What are you likely to get afterwards? Well, you likely have to account for a churn rate, and you likely have to account for buyer's remorse, and you likely have to account for like, well, you didn't give me what you promised. Why? Because I bought in guilt, right? So
Wow.
if you are putting reactive things into making that decision real for them, expect to have reactive people make those decisions, right? So then how do you do it on the flip side? Like if I don't want those people, so for me, okay, this is like a sales podcast, so how do I like to do sales, right? So my sales process is a modified version of something I learned from Jesse Elder. So again, another name if people want to check out. He does a lot of different programs, but basically, I want to not have a sales call. I want to have basically mini coaching sessions where I bring to awareness somebody's state and their subsequent decision on what they're choosing to do with that state. So we go into, okay, where are they at right now? But not just like, okay, I don't like these things, but it's like, what are the consequences of those things if you don't change? How long have you been in that state? How long are you choosing to stay in that state? Who else does it affect? Does it affect your family? Does it affect your partner? Does it affect your kids? Like, what are the ripple effects of where you're at, and what is the consequence and cost of inaction or not changing? Okay. Then we work on, okay, well, where is it that you want to go? And oftentimes people will not be able to articulate where they want to go. They just be like, well, I don't want what I just said. Okay, cool. You have clarity on what you don't want, but do you have clarity on what you do want? No, I don't. Cool. So it's my job now to bring to awareness to them, like, okay, this is actually the vision of my life that I want. Great. Now I know where you are and the consequences of staying there. I know where you want to go, and I'm very clear about why, like, what is it that you truly want? What stands in front of you is this gap, right? As the expert, I can diagnose what you need to do to cross that gap. You're going to have to choose to solve all those problems with me or without me, right? Like there are problems that exist, whether you choose to go with me or without me. Now I can set up and give you the invitation to close that gap with me. But you're leaving that call knowing that these are the costs of me not acting. These are the costs of inaction. These are the consequences of not doing anything. I'm choosing not to step up. Cool. Then I'm choosing not to work with you. Right. And listen, like full love, like it's not even a judgment call. It's just like, this is an invitation. It's not a pressure for you to do this. Right.
Yes.
So I think that is kind of like, that has a much different feel than, hey, listen, you have 12 hours to make this decision. Otherwise, your life is over. So I think that that answers your question as far as where you want to go with this.
Let's get into the nitty gritty of that, because obviously you and I are in similar spaces. So when you've got a strategy call, when you've got that mini coaching session, and you bring someone through that journey of, okay, well, what's the pain? What is the cost of inaction? What's the vision? Where is it that you want to go? Now they have a picture in their mind of what they want, and you help to diagnose that gap. And I'm sure that you even give like, hey, this is what you can do to get started right now, right? Like you give them something of value to get started now. So even if they didn't work with you, they leave that call saying, wow, Drasco really helped me here. Do you even, so number one, I love the idea of invitation versus I'm closing you to work with me. Two very different mindsets there. Do you even close it on that call, or do you give them time to think about what you talked about and then you follow up with them? What does the end of one of those sessions look like for you when you're talking with a potential client?
So I've done both. Like I've done both where it's like, okay, for the duration of this call, I'm going to have a fast action like bonus, and, you need to make a decision right now. And I've also been like, okay, that's fine. Think it over, etc. To be honest, I still haven't found my sweet spot with regards to where I want to be with this. Just simply because where I'm at in my business right now, it's still kind of early, and because I'm the one doing all the sales calls, I'm the one that's kind of responsible for everything. I just kind of tune in, and whatever happens. So yes. To be fair, I have done both. Where I have seen more success is it's like, yeah, okay, I get it that, you need time to think it over, especially if we don't have any like history beforehand. And the people that I work with now are going to be more of the like intellectual, intuitive, willful. I get that they need to feel right in order to work with me. And unlike when I was being reactive, because I knew that, maybe or think about it as a bus with square wheels, like that, it doesn't go anywhere. I have gotten people come back to me like, yeah, you know what, I decided I want to work with you. So in a grand scale, I'm kind of undecided. I think I'm leaning more towards like, okay, I'm going to create the space, but I also think there is an element that I can't control there, which is if I bring in people that know, like, and trust me already, they will have already kind of half made the decision, and then the call with me is more like a vibe check. So I don't think it's a simple conversation of like this or that. I think you have to look at your business in context, right? If it's completely cold for the work that I do, I think it makes sense to give people that grace period. If the people already know you, and as I begin to establish more of a presence and an audience, I think it'll be more along the lines of, okay, we're going to get on this call, we're going to go through this thing. There's going to be some expectation set up front, like this is a decision time, and you can choose to either work with me or not, but like I'm not going to do maybes at that point. So I'm kind of in the middle right now. I'm giving both states because I just want to be transparent. I've had success with both, but I think for the time being, I'm leaning more towards the grace bit.
I like that a lot. Absolutely. In order to not make this too rudimentary, I just want to say to everyone listening, for those who are listening who are currently working in a sales job or leadership, and you want to be a coach, you want to use your unique abilities and help other people, I think it's important to realize you do have something about you that you are an expert in through your own experience, through your own education, everything that you've done in your life, through your hardships, your pain points. Like, you have something that you can use to help other people, right? And what we're talking about here is coaching in the sense of, okay, well, you've built a business, help other people build a business. You've lost weight and have kept it off and have been lean, and you've got the body that other people want, help other people to get that body. You've earned a lot of money, help other people to earn money. Same with relationships. There's a coaching industry for literally every single industry out there, right? So now that preface is out of the way, let's say that we are a coach, okay, and we go to you, Drasco, for help. What are the most common struggles for new coaches in obtaining their first clients, right? Because you don't need a lot of clients in order to have 10K months, right? So it's that initial onboarding that I found is the most difficult, and it was the most difficult for me too, right? So what's the most common problem that you see with coaches who come to you for help when it comes to the onboarding of clients, and how do you help them through that?
Okay, so there's a bunch of different ways that we can take this question. So we can take it on the practical side of, well, I mean, they're all practical, but like the mechanics side of things, as far as, okay, what needs to be in place for you to do that? So to answer that succinctly, I think it really just comes down to understanding what you actually do for people from their perspective, right? So coaches oftentimes will be rooted as experts in the mechanics of their solution. They will be talking and thinking as the technician, which is natural for us because that's what we do. However, the opposite party, so your prospects, who are not your clients yet, because the difference is they haven't committed to up-leveling through your facilitation, they are thinking about their problem in their way. And your gap is to figure out, how do I structure my conversations to bring awareness to their pain and problems so that I can solve it using the modalities that I specialize in. So the example that I often use for that is like, if I have a water leak and I can't shower, I don't want the plumber to come in and be like, hey, so I'm thinking I'm going to use like this flange with like this sealant and this grout or whatever. I'm like, dude, like I need to take a shower. Right? So if I'm the plumber, I need to be talking about, okay, if you like hire me, I will get you back to a hot shower within the next hour. Cool. I want to work with that guy. I don't want to work with the guy that's talking about flanges. Right. And we'll often nod our heads and be like, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. But like, how often, like, let's say if you're a relationship coach, how often are you talking about, well, I help you set proper boundaries and, communicate better so that you can connect with your partner. okay, cool. I'd like to have like one dinner where I don't feel like I'm, at the table with a stranger who I resent.
Yes.
Talk to me about how do I have like a dinner with somebody that I fell in love with 20 years ago, and then we might have like a sales conversation. So I think that that's the first part as far as, what do you really truly need to understand to move forward is like you probably have low hanging fruit in front of you. You're just miscommunicating how you actually present what you do to them. So I think that that's like number one. Number two, now how do we get there? Okay, so there's a lot of internal drama that happens before we even get there. So the way that I structure that in 10K norm is basically in three different areas. So the third area we just talked about is the how, right? Like the marketing mechanics of like, how do I matter to the people that need me most? Okay, that really is just learning the technical aspects of how do I structure an offer, how do I sell it, how do I do it? And the way that we do that in 10K norm is it's like a choose your own adventure to close the gap. So if you've done like sales training before and a person's in front of you, you know how to close sales, cool. We don't need to go over that. We need to work on your messaging. Here are all the modules that are going to help you with that. So it's not a linear thing where like you have to go through everything. You pick and choose the pieces that are most relevant for you, and I can guide you to that. The other two pieces are what I mentioned at the beginning, which is about how do I think, feel, and act in accordance with normalizing 10K months. And that comes down to two things. So the first one is the problem of pressing the brakes. So I am my own worst enemy because I keep pressing the brakes on my own success. What this looks like on a day-to-day basis is all of the labels we give to our internal pain. The overthinking, the perfectionism, the imposter syndrome, the doubt, the lack of confidence, the limiting beliefs, all of those cumulative things, right? Like the lack of self-regulation. I distract myself when I should be working. I numb myself with other things. Like that's really been a pattern of me that I had to overcome. So that problem of pressing the brakes on moving forward, whether that is for my, even whatever it is, like in your business or the side hustle to making a full-time income, there are places where you press the brakes every time you want to go forward. So I want to make a marketing post, but I debated for 3 hours thinking of what I'm going to say. That's you pressing the brakes. Okay. So things like that need overcoming if we're actually going to attract the people to have those sales conversations.
So let me stop you right there because we have a question in the chat that goes along with something that you just said, because I love everything you're saying, by the way, and apologize for keep jutting in here, but I want to touch on things before I forget to bring them up. So Christy Farley from the chat just asked, number one is now with the current economic crisis, is it a good time to start a business? So we can touch on that. And I mean, the answer is yes, right? If now's not the time, there will never be a time, right? We got to start now. The second question she asked is, she's a holistic, let me just read this. She is a holistic life teacher. Okay. So it sounds to me like, let's just say life coach. Okay. And I've worked with life coaches. I don't do a lot of business coaching, but I do some. I've got a couple clients who are operating businesses. I help them with what I've done myself. And one of them's a life coach. Okay. And the biggest problem we ran into with life coaching is it doesn't necessarily always have a clear result when you market, right? Well, I'll help you to feel better. I'll help you to create a plan forward, right? And people hear that and it's just not sexy to them. Right? Like you said, it's kind of like the plumber saying, well, this is the flange we'll use. This is the sealant. Like, as someone, yes or no, do you work with life coaches?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. When you work with life coaches, how do you help them? And by the way, we can all be life coaches, guys. And it's kind of, one of those industries where everyone's like, I'm a life coach. But then it comes down to, well, who's actually doing it? Who's actually living by what they preach? And let's say the 5% of them are, right? So for those 5% who are living it, who do want to make a difference and who are going after it, how do you help them to really define their message so that it's not so general and broad and so that they're giving people what they want?
So great question. And again, full transparency, I'm actually working through this right now as well, because it took me a while. Like, I know I'm just kind of like going and I'm like into flow and saying things. it's taken a lot of hours to like even get to this point, and I'm still refining it in terms of like where it is that I actually like really truly fit, align with, and that really is going to be multiplicative for me and my brand and my business. So I think that's the first thing I want to get out of the way is like any business that you see right now that you respect has gone through this process tens of millions of times and will keep doing it, because like as I evolve, chances are the clients that I work with is also going to evolve, which then means let's start again with the messaging, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a universal ongoing problem that is like hygiene, right? You don't just take a shower once, you have to continuously take a shower to stay clean. That's how these things work. So with that out of the way, how do you actually get into defining what it is that you do? Number one, going back to the thing that presses the brakes, your hesitancy to niche down is going to be the first big problem. Oh, well, I can't just say I work with, this niche because I can serve everybody. Yes, it's true. And as soon as you serve everybody, you actually serve nobody, because it doesn't exist. So how do you do this? I think define the subset of who is your who, right? So let's just take the weight loss example, because I think it's one that everybody can relate to. Like when I went through this process in my first business, it was, okay, so I help people lose weight. Then that went deeper into, well, I help women lose weight. Okay, then that went into, well, I have women who have struggled for a long time to lose weight. Okay, that went deeper into, I help women who have a minimum of 20 to 100 pounds to lose that have struggled for a long time, and they want to do it without giving up wine or chocolate. Okay, when I say that, you know exactly who, like you can picture somebody in your head who is likely to be a candidate for that, and they're not going to look like a CrossFit athlete. I'm still going to use the same tools that I would have used regardless. Like everybody needs to know how to squat, everybody needs to know how to eat. The mechanics of my things, yeah, they're going to be modified because a CrossFit athlete is going to be different than like somebody for weight loss, but it's like I have to be comfortable with like serving this individual. We're all going to nod our heads and be like, yeah, I get it, that makes sense. But okay, so retract the butt and be like, can I think of 1,000 people who fit this very small niche statement, this very like deeply defined who? Is there 1,000 people, let's just say in North America, because that's like the biggest market? Can I think of 1,000 people in that market that would fit this? The answer generally is going to be yes. Okay. Is 1,000 people going to change your life? Yeah, 50 of those people are going to change your life. So then get really good at finding those 1,000 people and your life can be changed. But it's like there's a scarcity mindset of, well, if I'm too defined, I'm not going to get, okay, that is a breaks problem, because I'm sure you can find 1,000 people in the whatever 400 million people that exist in like North America. If you can find 1,000, your life is set for the rest of your life. You can just serve those 1,000 people and make a pretty good income across your lifetime.
Now, when you first decided to work with women, and then you decided to work with women who have struggled and have had these problems for a long time, how did you continue to niche down? Like what did that process look like for you?
So what it came down to was, again, initially, of course, you're accepting everybody. Like, hey, you want to work out, come by, I need the money. Like, that's all good. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just came down to, like I said at the beginning, I was like, okay, that gap between I'm telling somebody what to do and they're not doing it, that was always eternally fascinating for me. And where does that show up the most? It shows up the most in people that essentially have emotional eating problems. And I was like, I'm interested in the hard cases, because if I can solve those, then I can solve any problem.
Wow.
Which now I know was just me trying to solve my own problems, but the interest was there regardless. So that's how I was like, okay, I'm going to focus in on working with these people. And just to bring this back to the original question of like, is it a right time to start the business? So I had 5 gyms, independent gyms around my location. I charged $400 to $600 a month for what we did. So extremely high priced. And I started a lot of this, during and through the 2008 recession. So Yeah, I agree with your answer. Yes, the right time is yes. Okay, the right time is to do it now. So yeah, 100%.
Okay, so what I heard you say is you took in clients because you need to be earning. Like I see a lot of people, man, who they start their own business and they're doing all these things, like they're getting the website, they're getting the logo, they're getting their business cards, they're doing all these things, they're getting the t-shirts, and it's like, dude, you got to make money. Like you have to find clients and bring people in. There has to be money coming in order to have these expenses. So you started with women, and then from there you found who you liked to work with the most, and then you niched down. So you didn't start by niching down, you started by serving and helping, and then deciding, wow, I really like to work with this type of woman the most because they have these emotional problems that I like to work with as the hard cases. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I actually summed it up way better than I did, to be honest. But yeah, that's
You
100.
crushed it, man. No, you crushed it. Okay, so you started broad, but then you made it more specific. So how do you find those specific individuals? Like now that you found 1,000 in North America, right? Now that you want to work with salespeople, this is an example. I'll use myself. You want to work with salespeople. I could work with cell phone salespeople, car salespeople, insurance salespeople, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, whatever it might be. Now that I've decided, okay, I really love working with solopreneurs to help them develop their own sales cycle. How do I find 1,000 of those people so that I can bring in 50 that can change my life?
Right. So great question. And as always, I think that the right answer is like, it depends and it's context dependent. And I know that's the cop out answer because we all want that like one formula for thing, but the reality is it doesn't exist. And it's not ethical, I think, for people to be like, yeah, well, this is the way to do it because this is how I do it. So here's what I would say. So number one, again, full transparency. I'm actually still figuring out that piece with the current iteration of my business. Like that's kind of why I started the podcast. That's why I started like experimenting with what to do on the podcast. So I'm working my way through that. What I would say as the kind of more practical answer is it actually relates to the second piece of like we started with like, okay, what's the 10K norm program? So it's like the first piece is, okay, we got to stop putting the brakes on our success. If you've made a decision and you're going out there and you're actually like looking to do this and make this happen, I'm creating the logo, I'm creating the website, great. That's action. You've pressed the gas. Now we got to look at, well, I'm pressing the gas, but I'm not really getting the results that I want. Okay, that is a different type of problem that I'm also pressing the brakes. And they can simultaneously happen, but let's just say we're focusing on a different thing now. So how do you do that? Well, you use the tools that initially got you to transcend and overcome how you press the brakes. So how do I manage my emotions through setbacks and failure? How do I manage my thoughts when things don't go my way? How does that translate into results? Well, when I go out and I look for these, 1,000 or 50 people out of the 1,000, I'm going to have to try a bunch of different things. Okay. One is, can I do it long enough, be consistent enough, prove to myself that I have enough focus to try something out and see the result and the feedback that reality gives me? Meaning, do I have a narrative prior to when I start of why this isn't going to work? Or I have gone out, collected evidence, let reality tell me this is what works, this is what doesn't, and then I have concluded what this is. So again, how does this go from nebulous to specific? I am a life coach. Okay, I have these tools that can be used for everything. I haven't actually niched down. Okay, cool. Have I gone out and spoken to 30 people who may or may not even be eligible for life coaching, but I've put in the reps to see, okay, how do people respond to certain things? The ones that were more likely to buy but didn't, what differs from them than from the people who were like completely wrong? Okay, that is all data that reality is giving me on the thing that I'm putting out. I can use that and refine that so that I can modify where it is I look for people, how is it I invite them, where is it I invite them to, what are their qualities, what are their characteristics, etc. Right? But that's going to be a double game of focus and creating the evidence of the actions that I'm doing to try certain things, and also like self-coaching my way through not letting any of those things spiral me into these doom loops, right? Then just don't do anything. I press the brakes again. So it's a balancing game of a bunch of different things. But it really just comes down to going out and trying different things, and also not falling into certain shoulds, right? Like I should just run ads to get people. No, I completely disagree. I think you should run ads when you have evidence that you can sell people, and you have evidence that you know exactly who you serve, you know how it is that you can reach them. Then you can use ads to multiply that, because ads at the end of the day are just a multiplier of what's currently there. If what you have there is confusion and something that isn't really like viable, then you're just going to get more of that when you do run ads, with the added pressure of added costs and a whole new learning curve and things like that. So does that answer a question, or like
No, it answers it brilliantly. And I love and we got comments too that say thanks for the honesty when you say I'm still going through this myself. But I think it's also important to say you're very humble, because it's also important to say that you are many steps ahead of most people listening right now, right? And you don't need to be earning 50 grand a month in order to help somebody earn their first 5,000 a month, right? 10,000 a month. Like if you're earning 10,000, then you can help someone else earn 10,000. It's all about what you've done. You only need to be one step ahead to be an expert. And I think that's important for listeners too. Like you don't need to be the most fit person in the world. Like you need to have the level of fitness that you're coaching someone else to obtain, but you don't need to be like, Mr. Olympics. Like you don't need to look that way. And you don't need to be the richest person to help someone make money. You don't need to be the best salesperson in order to help somebody become better in sales. So what I hear you saying is try different approaches. Like you're doing your podcast. You're not just going to quit. You're going to do it until you see the results. You see the evidence, like you're saying, collect the evidence and then adjust accordingly. You can start with the content marketing. And if you see the reactions you want, if it's getting the evidence that you want, great, keep doing it. If not, try something new. And I like how you said, go out and talk to 30 people and tell them what you do and gauge their reaction. Like I used to tell people when they asked me what I do, oh, well, I'm a sales trainer. I said it with more enthusiasm, obviously, but I was like, no, I'm a sales trainer. I help sales teams earn more money. But now what I tell people, which gets a much better result and much better reaction, is, well, I'm like the Trojan horse of sales trainers. And they're like, what the hell does that mean? Like everyone knows what the Trojan horse is, right? It broke into the walls. It was like a facade. And then all the soldiers came out and slaughtered everyone there, right? So maybe not the best example, but I say to them, I come in to help your sales team earn more money. But what really comes out of this horse is a holistic life approach to sales. Like you're going to sell more if you feel better. You're going to sell more if you're more confident with yourself, more confident with your body, have more clarity. Living your purpose at work, you're going to sell more. So I come in with the idea of I'm going to help you make more money, but in order to get there, I'm going to give you what you really need, which is the 5 Ps I call them, which is my own framework. So being very clear with your messaging, knowing how you can help people, being very clear with your own personal story, all that's going to be very important in order to get those first clients. Now, my question to you, and I can't believe we've been talking for 53 minutes already. It blows my mind because there's a lot more I want to talk about. Maybe we can have you back on in the future too. I want to ask you about how to price an offer, because this is something when it comes to coaching, and that's, where we've taken this conversation. So let's stay there. When it comes to pricing an offer, obviously, for the person who's working a job while they're going off to become a coach at the same time, it's great because now you've got money to fuel your business from your full-time income. But at the same time, you're sacrificing time because you're working 5 days a week. Now you've really only got 2 days and sometimes nights and weekends to work on the business and coach. So you really, in a sense, have to be high ticket. You can't just be like, oh, for $100 a month, I'll coach you. Like realistically, your price has to be up there. So what are your thoughts on pricing a coaching offer? How should we look at pricing our services? And what's like the general process you go through your clients with there?
Absolutely. And a great question. And so the first thing I would lead with that is the hardest part about pricing is you owning and embodying that price. Okay. So what I mean by that is you can set whatever price you want, but it's like you said with your Trojan horse example. When you went in there and just said, I'm a sales trainer, you didn't really embody what that meant, But when you go in there and you say, I'm the Trojan horse of sales, like you embody everything what that means. When somebody's like, well, what does that mean? Now you're all excited to like tell them, like you embody, like I'm going to come in there. You're not even going to see what I'm going to do, but everything is going to improve. So you're going to kill it in the positive direction, right?
Yes.
So, the embodiment of that makes the pricing bit quite a lot easier. So I think that's the first one. Now, how do I get there? Well, that's the inner game part, right? That's how do I manage my thoughts? How do I manage my emotions? How do I self-coach my way through it? And then how do I manage my focus to get to a point where that just feels natural, right? Like that's the summation of the 10K norm program as far as like that inner game is concerned. Now, with regards to specifics of how do I actually price the thing, especially if you're going from I have a job to a side hustle. So the first thing you have to overcome internally is that you're not being paid for effort. And your whole life, you have gone through the guise of actually being paid for your effort. You just got paid more for your effort, which in other ways, like you said, it's time. If I put in 8 hours, I'm expected to do stuff for 8 hours. I'm getting paid for 8 hours, whether that's a salary and it's kind of like hidden in or per hour. It doesn't really matter. Even if it's commission, it's still based off of how I actually, the effort I put into the results that I provide. So if I'm not being paid for effort, another way to look at this, and the best example that I've heard, like it's not mine, but it's one that I heard, I believe it's from Nick Peterson, who's another name you guys should check out. But he was talking about, okay, if I need to create a pool in my backyard, so I need somebody to dig the hole. Okay, I got 2 people that are coming to me to dig that hole. One guy's like, yeah, I will, come in there with the machine, like auger or whatever it's called, and I'm going to do it in 3 hours. And it's going to cost $1,000. And the other guy comes in and he's like, yeah, it's going to be, $500 and I'm going to dig it by hand. It's going to take me 8 hours. Right? Or let's just say they actually charge you the same. Like it's going to be $1,000 for both of them. Like who are you going to take? You're going to take the guy that gives you the result that you want in the shortest amount of time.
Mm.
And then if you say no to the guy who's going to dig it by hand, but he's going to be like, well, I put in more effort, like I should get paid more. No, actually you shouldn't, because what I care about, because I'm the one that has the leverage before I pay you, I only want the hole that I can put my pool in. Yeah. Whether you dig it by hand or with an ice pick or with a machine is completely and utterly irrelevant to me. Okay. So when we flip that around and now we're the person who's making that offer, who's pricing that, if you are looking at it in terms of effort, so what effort can I do to produce the result in this coaching client, you're looking at it wrong. What you sell is the results of what that person gets when they commit to the transformation that you not produce, but facilitate. So you are a guide that tells the other person where to look so they can go forward and actually make that transformation for themselves. You're just there to support it, but you're selling the result of what they want and you price it according to that result. So generally those results, if you're, in the heart space or whatever, life coaching bit, it's going to be some sort of transformational result. It is a little bit harder to articulate. Yes, I agree. Than like, I'm going to give you a 10% ROI, but it is ultimately that result that they are paying for. And this whole thing of like high ticket, the reality is most high ticket is like an elaborate vacation, right? Like you're asking the other person to give up an elaborate vacation. It might not be just for themselves. It might be like a family vacation if it's whatever, like 5K or whatnot. Mm-hmm. But like something in the sentiment of like a vacation to completely transform their life. Okay. It's kind of like when you put it that way, it's like, okay, well, this should be a no-brainer. And oftentimes it can be, but again, depends on your embodiment of it and who's on the other side. So I guess, yeah, that would be my answer to that question.
Yeah, and I think I love everything you said, and I think it's really important too, because generally we're helping people with something that we've gone through ourselves. So look back at that own time of your life where you were going through this thing. Like for me, it was when I was overweight. It's when I was earning great money at a job, but I had no idea of what my purpose or meaning was in that job, right? I was lost, I was depressed, I was anxious. So the result for someone like who's going through what I was going through is I'm going to help you to alleviate that anxiety. I'm going to help you to feel better about yourself. I'm going to help you to have more energy. I'm going to help you to find more meaning in what you're doing. If someone came to me at that point and said that, I would be like, well, how are you going to do that? But I would ask how, because I'd be interested in the first place. Right. And I was earning great money. So I would have been like, okay, well, here's $3,000. How long does this go for? 12 weeks. Okay, let's rock and roll. And obviously the price will be different depending on you and your expenses and everything else that you're doing and what's worth your time. But I absolutely love what you said there about it's got to be about the result, right? So be clear on your result. It's important to have some sort of system that you bring people through. Like you've got your framework that we've talked lately about. We could dive even more into that a different time because I want to. But what is the result you give people? And when they get excited and ask, well, how are you going to do that? Without going into every little detail, what's the framework that you can guide people through to give them a picture and to set the expectation of how you're going to help them, but not how you're going to transform them, like you said, Dresco, how you're going to guide them through their own self-transformation. So that when they 3 months later say, wow, thank you so much for everything you did for me, it's like, no, man, like you did this yourself. I was simply the one to help you connect the pieces, connect the dots.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I can even like go deeper into that. Like I know we're kind of like at time. I'm okay to go deeper if you want to go deeper, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff I can even comment just on that piece.
Go ahead. Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. So, so you mentioned, okay, like I got to sell the result, and the way that we're going to like get that result is, I'm going to help you. So you mentioned like, I'm going to help you like feel better. I'm going to help you find your purpose, etc. I would actually argue that goes in the mechanics conversation, right? Like that we're actually talking about, these are the things I'm going to help you do. That doesn't really connect to what we spoke about at the beginning. Like, what is my pain and what is my vision, right? Like in between that is a chasm that you have to cross that has a few particular problems. So I'm going to take the same thing that you said, I'm going to reword them as problems.
Please.
So right now you are in a job and your problem is you actually don't even know what your purpose is. So if you want to go forward and not be depressed with your work, you're going to have to find out what your purpose is, right? It is draining you to be in this job and you want to be in something that lights you up. So we have to first figure out, where are you wasting a lot of energy? And also, do you even know what lights you up? That's the second problem you're going to have to solve. And whatever, let's just for the sake of example, like stop there. So now my invitation becomes, do you want to solve these? Well, yeah, I do. Okay, cool. So I have a 3-month program that's going to walk you through how to do that. Do you want to go do it? Yeah. How much? Not like now we start the sales conversation, but it's an invitation based off of the problems. I haven't even told you the mechanics of how it's done. Now, why didn't I do that? Well, it's not because, I'm trying to like do a bait and switch and not tell you what's in it. It's also because in your current state, if you could solve your problem, you would have. So how do you know, like, what is your criteria to judge those tools to know what their efficacy is like? Wow. So it's like, okay, let's just, again, because fitness is something everybody can relate to. Like, how do you know that you do or don't need squats if I've spent years studying like how to properly do squats? Like, you are the one that has knee pain whenever you walk down the stairs. That's your experience. I'm telling you that I can get you to exercise in a way that eliminates your pain from now and going forward and decreases the amount you experience when you walk through, like when you walk down the steps. Do you want to go ahead and do that? Right? I haven't told you how I'm going to do the mechanics. I haven't told you about the squats. I haven't told you about any of that because it's actually irrelevant to you because you don't have the right frame of mind. You don't have the right experience to actually judge the efficacy of that. That's why you're hiring me as the expert. So I think it is a very important distinction when you're doing sales for transformative work, where if the sophistication of your audience is such that they likely don't know what the answer is, or they think they know what the answer is, talking about it is only going to get their brain to loop in areas where they're less likely to actually make the commitment. So that sales conversation needs to be about your commitment to honor not wanting to live the consequences of your pain and move towards the vision that we helped you define. Do you want to go do that with me, or do you want to go do that with somebody else? Right? But it's not about the mechanics of the thing. It is about their commitment to say yes to themselves, not about say yes to my thing.
So it's about just talking about the pain points, right? Like I had no meaning, I had no purpose, I was depressed, I was anxious. What I wanted was this. Would you and I got this as a result of my process. Would you like me to help guide you through that process versus saying we're going to do this in order to get there? Because obviously, like you said, in the state that they're in, they would have already done those things. So it's not talking about the how, it's talking about the pain, where they want to go, and then us being the guide to fill in that gap in between.
Correct. And in the moment of the making of the commitment, what I'm actually getting them to do is to increase their awareness around the consequences of where they're at, the cost of inaction, and kind of that up leveling of like, do I really want to step into the vision of myself that I have just said that I actually want? Okay. It is going to sting. It's going to cost a certain amount. It's going to take a certain amount of time. How long? Like if I've been living this way for years, okay, cool. You've been living this way for 5 years in misery and you don't want to spend 5K to solve that right now, and that 5K like won't get you, in bankruptcy. Cool. Like then I got nothing to like, I can't help you in that case. Like, no problem. Continue your suffering, but you're not going to leave this call without knowing that you're choosing not to step forward.
Wow.
If you say, I'm like, I just emotionally, I don't like feel connected with you. Also cool. Cause then that wouldn't have been a good coaching relationship, right? Like if you are cool with my vibe, if you've been honest about the answers that you've given me, and you're now presented with a solution, now we can begin to work and coach through, okay, like quote unquote objections, but really it's like, what am I hesitating on pulling the trigger on? And yeah, if it's like a legit, like a financial thing, like I really can't afford 5K, cool. Because then if I did convince you to do it, you'd be in that reactive state. But this way, it's more about my commitment to myself. That person that does make that commitment, they're now more likely to actually do the work because they've committed to themselves, not to me, than if I convince them of my process.
Absolutely. It's incredible. Just everything that you just said. And I think for those still struggling on determining what that result really is, right? It's where you are right now, guys. Like right now is the result that you're helping other people to get to. To be the expert, you just have to be one step ahead of someone else. Just one step ahead of someone else. Sometimes you don't want to learn from the person who's 20 steps ahead of you. You want to learn from the person one step ahead, 2 steps, so they can really help to shine the flashlight on where you are, so that they're not someone way up here shining the flashlight from an above aerial view, right? It doesn't work well that way. So absolutely incredible. There's so many areas we could go here, Drasko, but I want to talk about your program. I want to talk about your podcast. So tell us about your coaching program and your podcast.
Yeah, so the coaching program is 10K Norm. The podcast is 10K Norm. The website is 10knorm.com. Like everything is 10K Norm. The reason being exactly what I mentioned at the beginning, right? Like I help heart-centered entrepreneurs that are under 10K months. So either they're, just starting that road, or they're not inconsistently able to normalize, like, and stabilize that 10K month range. I help them transcend all of the blind spots that get them from thinking, feeling, and acting, right? So the inner game aspects, pressing the brakes, pressing the gas, but not getting to where they want to go. I help them through the inner game aspects. So that's like the life coach bit, while also learning to authentically market. So that is the how problem. So they can normalize 10K months in their business. Okay. So that's what the coaching program is about. The podcast started to be an accompaniment of that. So I just it wasn't on a whim. Going back to what, we spoke about earlier, of just kind of starting and trying different things out and getting the evidence. So my girlfriend for the longest time was like, you really need to do a podcast because like you're good at talking these things. And even a podcast I listen to, it kind of sounds like what you do, whatever. I'm like, I don't know. Like I don't really listen to podcasts. I prefer video. Like I'm more visual, so it's like, I don't really think this is my thing. She's like, no, you really need to do it. Like, okay, what I'm going to do is, if I really truly can do this, then I need to be able to talk about it from the top of my head. So I just sat down. I was like, I need to come up with 100 episode ideas right now. And I sat down and I actually came up with 104 of like, here's the episode title, one sentence about what it'd be about. I was like, okay, I think I have something here. And kind of that whole one step ahead and following the breadcrumbs. So I recorded the first 10 episodes just like literally in front of my camera like this.
Cool.
And I said, okay, let me try this out. It was pretty fun. It was like, I can do this. Then I said, okay, I'm going to commit to doing 100 episodes, and I'm not going to look at any metrics for any of those 100 episodes. Why? Because the act of doing this and the results that I get sales wise is going to be the only metric that matters, not the actual like number of people that are looking at it. Because right now my business is about getting clients, not about building audience. But regardless, both are going to need me to actually do the podcast and produce. So that's the behavior that I want to implement. So I was like, 100 episodes before I decide whether to keep this or not. So I'm at like 33 right now. So we're, a third of the way there.
Congrats.
And then, thank you. And then I went into, okay, I know I can like just talk about something for like half hour, right? And it's valuable. But what if I use this as a way to like demonstrate what I do? So I started doing these real talk segments where I bring people on that are heart center entrepreneurs under 10K months, like within my target market. And I was like, let me just do like a live coaching call and record that and use that for content. And that's actually been going really well. Like, we've had multiple people like shed tears on the podcast. I really get big aha moments. And it's actually been cool for me to witness. Like, how can I just take a stranger and have this type of experience on something that's supposed to be about content? So like, I'm exploring what that's going to look like and where it's going to go. So I'm a third of the way there. So I got 2/3 left to like finish off this experiment. I don't exactly know where it's going to go, but you know what I mean? Like you said, I'm living my own principles, right? I'm letting reality tell me what's working and what's not working. And I'm focusing on the things that I can control, which is the actions that are needed to either prove this thing or not prove this thing, right? So it's like you win or learn, right? So that's kind of where the podcast is. It's an accompaniment to the program. So if you want to get an idea beyond like what I said today, like what my coaching actually looks like, more so on the like inner game stuff, we usually just use marketing as the vehicle for like, why am I pressing the brakes and what's internally going on that's stopping me. Yeah. Certainly the podcast will be the best place for that. I haven't dove too much into the marketing bits just because I feel like they're a little bit less relevant. They're important, but less relevant to what the real problem is.
And they're always changing. I mean, the tactics are always changing. So it's really, if the inner game is there, no matter how the how changes, you're going to be able to adjust and pivot when necessary because you've got the inner game. So I 100% relate to that, man. And I'm going to have links, everyone, 10knorm.com in the description. Go click it. Check out Drasko. Check out his podcast. Check out everything he's doing. Is that the best place to connect with you? Like, where's the best social platform to connect with you, Drasko?
Yeah, I mean, 10K Norm is where you can find everything. The second bit will probably just be Instagram, which actually I haven't changed yet. I'm going to change it to 10K Norm as well, but it's actually just my name now. So at Drasko, like Drasko, if you start typing it in. There's not a lot of us, so Drasko right click will be the one, but yeah, they'll be in the show notes. So if you're going to reach out, probably Instagram would be the best place, but you can find everything on 10knorm.com.
Excellent, brother. My final question for you is, what is the positive difference or the positive impact that you want to make in the world at this chapter in your life?
That's a very good question. So I would say the biggest difference that, like, I guess, okay, in this chapter, but also like where I feel like my life is heading to, is that I would not be needed. And what I mean by that is, the way that I view coaching is I should be the guide and the facilitator. So after our time is done, you don't actually need me anymore. Like, you get to a point of self-empowerment, self-efficacy with a skill set that's demonstrated and evidenced by reality that we've worked on together, that for the problem that you hired me to do, you don't need me anymore. So as far as like the overall message, like, I guess, is one of empowerment, in that we all have the capacity to get to that point where we can use our own power to overcome whatever's in front of us. Sure, I've certainly got a lot of coaching in my life. I'm a big proponent of it. I think coaches need coaches too. But at some point, it is us that transcend that by like who we become. So I think that would be the biggest one.
Well said, man. Well, and I completely agree. I mean, my one-on-one coaching is, I've purposely made it very high ticket because I really would rather people go through the academy that I offer, the boot camp and the academy. But the one-on-one is very high ticket because, like you said, even after 3 months of that, I don't want you to be with me one-on-one. I'd rather you go through the academy so that you can continue building momentum versus just one-on-one, because that's a lot of our time, right, that we could be using for other things. So I absolutely love that idea of not just being, the therapist, which they have their place, right? Absolutely incredible, who does stay with someone long-term. But as a coach, we want to help people get the result and learn how to maintain that result and strengthen that result themselves after we're no longer with them, right? So I relate to that. And I mean, I commend you for everything you're doing. I congratulate you on the podcast. I can tell just by our conversation, I took a lot out of this myself, brother. And I don't say that to all of my guests, right? All the guests listening, by the way, I love all of our conversations, but I took a lot personally from you. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for being on the show today, Dresko. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. It was my pleasure. And like I said, the hairstyle does it. Like as soon as you, it's a win. So yeah, it was fun on my end too. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next time. We'll definitely have you back on, my friend.
Awesome. Love it.
That was an incredible conversation with Drasko Rajcevic from 10K Norm. Again, 10knorm.com is in the description. You can find all of his different links right through his website, whether it's his coaching, his podcast, whatever else it is that he offers and talks about. And guys, we talked about a lot in this conversation. We talked about earning 10K a month, right? But we didn't just talk about that. We talked about the inner game. We talked about the gap that's between where you are now, where you want to go. We talked about how you are an expert right now in some area of your life, right? Where you are right now, people would pay you to be in that place. Very important to understand that. You might say, but Brandon, my life is boring. It's like, yeah, it's boring to you because you're living it every day, right? But to other people, you have something that they want. So why not offer the opportunity for them to take advantage and work with you to help them get to where you are right now, right? Imagine, again, bringing it back to the first question I asked, imagine being able to do what you want, when you want it, wherever you want, with the people you want, right? Financial freedom. You can do that by practicing your own unique abilities. And guess what? When you're helping people with what you're naturally skilled at and gifted at, and you're doing what brings you joy, that is purpose. That's how you live your purpose, using what you're great at to make a difference in the world. And Drasko really enunciated what that looks like. Links to his platforms in the description. For all those wondering how you can support the Be Better broadcast, number one, thanks for watching. Number two, share this episode with one friend. We don't run ads. We aren't sponsored, right? We do that purposely. We can earn a little bit of extra money doing it, but it's not worth not getting this episode out to more people who could use the advice and information that we talked about with Drasko today. So share this episode right now. Hit that share button with one friend. Send it to your WhatsApp group. Send it to your Facebook page, whatever it is. I greatly appreciate it. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button. Christy, I just saw that you shared this. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here and asking great questions the whole time. And thanks to everyone else who asked questions too. Thank you guys so much for watching. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.